All right. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for stopping by. So, today we're going to be talking about a feature on the Drupal standard sites called the Research Projects and Galleries. So, to begin, this is a quick outline. We're going to go through a pretty thorough introduction here, kind of covering the differences between your research galleries and your research projects, how they function, and some of the views that you can toggle between them. We're going to also cover how research galleries and projects work and different ways to use the gallery and other examples, followed by some resources, and then time for the Q&A. Okay, so what is the research gallery? The research gallery, or more officially in Drupal language, the research landing page, is a content type that hosts your research projects. So the functions of the research gallery, you can actually change the title of the research gallery, so it doesn't always have to say that. For example, this is actually from the design site. As you can see, they have research gallery. I prefer calling it a research gallery just because research landing page is honestly kind of a mouthful. So when I'm using the term gallery, I'm basically just saying landing page. Research projects. So research projects are basically the content that exists on the gallery. It's basically the main thing, right? You can see here, this is just like a quick test one that we produced with some lorem ipsum text. Not a whole lot to see here. It includes a large picture here with a few researchers, even though they're not actual researchers. They are a current and former member of ASE Web Services. You'll see that two of them are actually working links that go directly to a bio page on the site. So that is one of the features a project has. And we're going to go into a little bit more about what they have to offer later on. So primary role of your research gallery, it's to share the projects and publications you have on your website to your audience. But we're going to find out that the gallery is actually a pretty flexible tool, and you can get pretty inventive with it if you put in enough thought into it beforehand. So as I stated before, there's a couple different views you can kind of set for your research gallery to display on your website. And there's a total of two different views, the grid view and the table view. And depending on the kind of content you had, one of these views is going to be more beneficial than the other. So we have the grid view. It's a much more visual kind of view. It comes with images, but it doesn't really have, at least on the front-facing side, the list of researchers, or as Drupal likes to call them, investigators. The terminology, researchers and investigators, kind of means the same thing. And you can also edit those terms in the taxonomy section. So you don't have to necessarily have investigators. And if you want to do that later on, if you do have a research site, you can contact us and we can kind of walk you through how to go through that. But like I said, this is the grid view here. And the next view is table view. So this is where we start to see on the right-hand side, the list of investigators/researchers. The advantage of the table view, besides just having investigators, is being able to link externally, as we're going to see here in a minute. With the investigators, like I said, you can include names of researchers, not just from Ohio State, but also outside the university. So if you have a research project that has collaborators from either another university or institution, you can include them in the additional investigator space. The investigator space above that is going to be where you include the folks from Ohio State specifically. And like I mentioned earlier, you can also link to bio pages if the researcher has a people page on your website. So for example, on this particular one, you can see on the top, there's a research project directory landing page here. The extreme market share analysis has an investigator named Brian Weaver, and it's linked to where it actually goes to his people page on one of our websites. So that's one of the features that you can use with the research gallery. And it works mostly with the table view. The grid view, you actually have to click the project to be able to see which investigators are part of the project. But then those are also linkable there too. It's just that this particular view, this one that looks more like a list, that lets you list your investigators right on the research gallery. So research galleries and research projects rely heavily on taxonomy and your vocabulary terms. This is actually a typo here. You actually have a total of 3 research vocabulary terms in the taxonomy section of the Drupal admin menu. And in the next following slides, it's just kind of a quick walkthrough of how we go about doing that. So as you can see here in the screenshot below, I have highlighted the structure section, and that's where you go into taxonomy. And then you'll be presented with this list of vocabulary terms. And it'll have like different descriptions that tell you what they actually affect. So 3 of these actually affect research. So on this screenshot, we have what we call other stuff. This is for our example website. Your site probably has some different terms. They're all pretty unique. So for here in Drupal, when you actually edit a research project, this thing that says other stuff is actually going to be research terms 1. And likewise, for a couple of the other ones here, we see year down at the very bottom. That would be research terms 3. And there actually is another one on this site that this particular screenshot doesn't show you. There's a total of 3 research vocabulary terms that you can add terms for and edit. On this more correct and accurate page, we actually have a list of terms per year. This is where we have very specific taxonomy based on year. So this goes on from 2010 at the very top to 2015 for anything published within that year. And we actually get to the edit page. When we edit the research project itself, we're going to see these terms populate under research terms 2. And as you can see here, for this specific one, I picked research under research terms 2. I picked year 2020 for this one. And when I save that and go back to the research gallery here, it actually will create a filter for the year, and the year will populate on the right-hand side here. So on the very top one in this list, we see the extreme market share analysis by the researcher, Brian Weaver, and it says year 2020. So that's just one way of organizing your research projects on your site. With this in particular, these terms, you're probably going to have different vocabulary terms and taxonomy. I know I said that before, so I just don't want anyone to be confused just by this specific example. So we're going to eventually look at a few example sites, and you're going to notice they have different filters, and that's based on the vocabulary terms that's listed on the site. And this just shows a little bit more about the filter terms. You can create filter terms for research projects by adding specific taxonomy terms that help your visitors easily find specific projects. So for example, on this website, I believe this is from Chemistry and Innovation, if I'm not mistaken. They have their terms listed as available technologies, licensed technologies, and other technologies. And these are essentially the filters that you can select from to help narrow down the search results for research projects. You can also edit your research projects to link to external sites. And this is pretty common for departments that are more heavily publishing in either scientific or scholarly journals. So if you want to do that, you would edit the research project, and you would go down to this field here. It says link to outside site. You would just paste the URL there. And when you save it to the gallery, it's going to essentially direct users to an external publication. So once you save the research project, it's going to automatically populate in the gallery here. So you won't need to worry about using any menus or anything like that to get it to show up here. It just automatically goes directly to here. And it's also why that we're only allowed to have one research landing page per site. We do have a sandbox site that we experiment with. And the thing with that is we actually do have 2 research galleries. The thing is, though, there's no way to separate them. So whatever is going to be on one gallery is automatically going to be on other. So it's really just a matter of redundancy more than anything. So trying to kind of cut back on that and keep it to a minimum. So when it comes to actually creating the research gallery, people with research manager access cannot actually create a landing page on their own. They actually have to reach out to us just so we can get that process started for them. You would just submit a ticket, or you can email me at ralston.128. That said, once we actually get that up and running, you have access to edit the research landing page if you have research manager access. And research managers, in addition to that, can also create and edit research projects. So you have control over that. It's just a matter of getting the landing page set up to begin with. And you can always reach out to ASC Technology Services, specifically web services. And I can get you training for that if that's something you're interested in. So we went into a lot of the technical details about how to create research galleries, how to edit them, and how they work and how they look. We're going to actually go through a few ways that we could use them. So with this, ways to use Research Gallery. Like I said earlier, you can direct users to publications on scientific and scholarly journals. And this is a pretty common practice for a lot of the science-based offices and departments at OSU. So for example, this is from, if I'm not mistaken, it's not from Life Sciences. I think it's from the Museum of Biological Diversity. So a lot of what they have essentially goes to journals like Molecular Ecology Resources. Likewise, a very similar thing that other, I guess, more of the humanities and liberal arts tend to focus on. They might do the same thing. So instead of a scientific journal, they might actually link to external sites with published books, papers, things like that, articles into journals. So for example, we have the English site here, and on the Oxford University Press website, instead of details about the research project, it's Oxford University Press, and it's a book about Blackfriars in early modern London. And you could also use a research gallery to highlight and showcase projects from graduate students. So this is from School Design website, and I really, really enjoyed what they did here, especially with the project we have on the right. There's a lot of detail, and I couldn't show you everything just because I just don't have the space for it in a PowerPoint presentation. But you can get very, very creative and in-depth with your research projects here. So I'm going to go through a couple more examples. We actually already seen a few. We already seen the English site. We've already seen some of chemistry. We're going to look a little bit at ACAD briefly. So we're on ACAD right now. We're looking at their research gallery. So the one I had as an example, Embrace, using autoethnography and animation to strengthen the asexual community. I want to go in a little bit more in depth just to show you how much detail you can actually add to a research project. So depending on what you're doing, something like this, where you have a lot of these images, you're showing off a lot of this animation work, awards, things like that. This is a really, really great use of a research project where we have all these details, we have some filters, we have all kinds of things that work here. It looks like ACAD is using specific filters for animated shorts, gaming, graduate student research, interactive media. Going to look at another one real quick, Eyes of Miriam VR. This is a VR project a group of folks did, which I think is really, really good looking. And we're seeing a lot of the use of pictures here. It's very well structured. There's a lot going on that we can see. Credits to folks who were involved. So I think there's one more I want to show you, and I believe it was with Meerschaum. So let's see what Meerschaum is doing. So it looks like they are going more with this list table view here, not the grid view. So it looks like they are, let's see if these link externally or internally. Okay, so these are all linked internal on the site. We have a lot of information here. We have our researcher, Rachel Brown. And that's just to show you how that works. It also works pretty well just with this on here as well. And I think one good thing that they're doing here is that they have a lot of different terms at work that provide some pretty in-depth information about, if this is research produced by faculty or a graduate student or a combination of the two, what year they're doing, things like that, what department they're affiliated with. And with English, we already saw some of that. We're just going to go over that super briefly. So English is using theirs for recent faculty books and publications. So most, if not all, these link to an external site. So Early Modern Herbals and the Book Trade. That takes us straight to Cambridge Core. Yeah, this looks like I don't know if this is necessarily a book publisher. I think this is a book publisher. Yeah. I could spend all day browsing, just looking at English's publications here. And their bios also lead straight to here as well. So that's it, everyone.